Now, a borderless Africa may no longer be just a pipe dream. According to the African Union 2063 agenda, there will be a single African Union passport that permits freedom of movement and shared development among African nations. But is a borderless Africa a good or a bad thing? And why has it taken so long to implement the African passport policy? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Now, in line with the African Union's aspirations of bringing down barriers and easing the movement of people and goods across Africa, two countries, Rwanda and Mauritius, have already implemented the policy of visa on arrival. And now a third country, Ghana, has joined in the fray. Kasarina Vitotsi takes a look at how Ghana stands to reap the benefits of an open borders policy and why other African countries should not be left behind.
A borderless Africa, an African passport. At this recent conference in Ghana, delegates embraced the idea of easier movement between African countries.
The term migrants is continuously seen from a negative perspective, even though there's enough evidence to prove that there is more to gain from migration than there is to lose.
So what could be gained? Intra-African trade currently stands at around 12% compared to 40% in North America and 60% in Western Europe, both areas where there is free movement between states and countries. Here in West Africa, there's been freedom of movement for ECOWAS citizens across all 15 member states for more than 30 years. Analysts say it's led to increased trade and accelerated development. Now, Ghanaian leaders believe that's an opportunity that should go Africa-wide.
We don't only need to think about the movement of goods and services, but remember that those goods and services move because people make them move. And so it's important for us to think of what is going to happen and how do we manage that process of people moving across our continent with a view to creating greater economic opportunity for all of us.
Ghana will start offering a visa on arrival service to all African Union citizens from July. It means an AU national will be able to stay in Ghana for up to 30 days. The African Union hopes other countries will soon follow suit. Many Ghanaians are behind the plan.
I'm thinking it's the right thing for Africa to unite, because if Africa comes together, it will be a better place for everybody. If Africa comes together and they make everything together and they spend the same money, it will enhance the growth of the development of the African people.
For me, I think it's a good thing. And looking at the philosophy of the Osajefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, was also to have a freedom of movement to African countries. So for me, I think it's a good thing.
The Ghanaian government believes the move will stimulate air travel, trade, investment and tourism. But to see the full benefits of opening its own border, other AU countries will have to return the favour. Katerina Vitotsi, CCTV, Accra, Ghana.
Well, the creation in June 2015 of a free trade area from Cape Town to Cairo is possibly the most significant event in Africa since the formation of the Organization of African Unity in 1963. The tripartite free trade area covers a population of 632 million and a combined GDP of $1.3 trillion. The area spans 17.3 million square kilometers. It is a grand move to merge existing regional organizations into a single African economic community. But can Africa surmount integration barriers? Coletta Wanjohi sat down with Fatima Haram, the African Union's Commissioner for Trade and Industry.
Ghana has recently removed visa for other African countries. In what context can we see this move by Ghana? Is having a borderless Africa a good or a bad thing?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, of having me. But I think let me just talk about movement of people in general. You know, when you talk about integration, I think it's very important we talk about movement of people, because when we talk about movement of goods, goods do not move themselves. So we need people, we need integration of people. And it's very important when you talk about integration, you must talk about an Africa without borders, because, you know, it was a colonial power that divided Africa, and actually we're better as a continent. And actually, even for the African Union, we exist because of the integration agenda, especially the AU. The OAU is about struggle, liberalization, and so forth. But really, the African Union today, our raison d'etre, our mission is really integration. Now, the issue of Ghana, we really welcome very much Ghana openness to people to come to Ghana, and just get visa, 30 days visa at the border. This is a decision of, a retreat of Minister of Foreign Affairs to discuss about movement of people and what do we do and how do we accelerate it. And Ghana was one of them that implemented right away. And we are very, very happy. We applaud Ghana for that effort, and we encourage also others to do so. But also, there are some other countries such as Rwanda. Rwanda also have that experience of movement of people. And actually today, if you talk to the government, we spoke to the president, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and high other official. I think the experience has been very positive. I mean, yes, they opened their border, but they're confident about their talent. Other people did not get their job. Yes, there is a risk of crime at the border, but it's very, very negligible, small. And they put the system in place to capture all of these things. So yes, there is a risk, but we understand that from the experience of Rwanda, the risk is very negligible. It's actually less than 1%.
However, we still have some African countries that seem to be a bit skeptical about embracing a borderless Africa. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, again, everybody can move at their own speed. But I think that it's very, very important to note that the whole Africa is aware of this issue, is aware of tackling that issue, and is aware that it's a critical issue. But now they also have to be ready. They have to be ready to make sure that there is a system in place to ensure that everybody can get visa at the border. There is a system in place to ensure that if there is any issues of terrorism, all these things you can know also how to deal with. So of course the country has to be ready in order for them to open. But the good thing is, all Africa, I think, we're all willing. That has been discussed also on this upcoming summit in July of 2016 in Rwanda, in Kigali, Rwanda, during the Head of State Summit. We're going to, hand African Union passport to all our Head of State and government so that, when they move it in Africa, at least they can use that AU passport to popularize it, and also to Minister of Foreign Affairs. And later on, we intend to also give it to business people. But that's not enough. Our issue is not movement of business people. It's not just movement of government official or head of state. Our issue is movement of people for all African. And actually, this is what Rwanda has done. This is what Ghana has done. Kenya, we understand, is on the line to make sure that they put their processing in place to move forward, and other countries as well. So I think that our aim again is really movement of people.
When we're talking about a borderless Africa, what benefits are we looking at as far as trade and investment is concerned?
I think we gain a lot. When you talk about continental free trade area, one Africa, one market, you have to have, it's a precondition to have, I mean, today the intra-African trade, that, we're moving from one border to another. I mean, it will increase, the hustle, especially women, because when you look at the percentage of the trade across the border, 85% of them are women. It will increase. Yes, there may be that there is a small, revenue lost from the custom, but the volume of trade will compensate any, volume of custom. The other thing also that is also important, today our youth are migrating, to Europe. And actually movement of people also mean movement of talent. If, Ghana has, good talent in I don't know, automobile industry, and, another country don't have it, people can also move. And I think that that's also something that is very good. So it's good for trading in Africa. It's good for the supply chain of Africa.
Then, Commissioner, once we have a borderless Africa, there are obviously some risks and challenges that are going to be involved or that are going to come up because of this kind of borderless situation. What are some of the risks we are looking at, and how can we mitigate them?
Yes, of course there are risks, as we know. Today we live in a world, and that's not Africa, I mean Europe, everywhere, America. We live in a world that, there is terrorism. you know, there is a lot of ignorance. There is a lot of intolerance about religion and so forth. And I think that, you know, all that stuff, in my view, it's captured by the fact that, you know, either there is, you know, not really clearly respect to human dignity. And when I talk about human right, human dignity, is maybe that is done by other, or is maybe that, you know, because when you're food insecure, also your dignity is touched. When you don't have the right to education, your dignity is touched. So it's poverty and also good governance, you know, all over. And I think that when you have that type of things, it will lead you to extreme actions, maybe hate to other because, you know, they have, you know, they're better than you, better educated than you, you know, they have, you know, better cars and they can travel and you can't because you are looking for the minimum possible. Or it can lead you to, you know, extremism, you know, sometimes, you know, brainwashing our children and all these things to tell them that, you know, this is what religion is. And I think that all of these things can be addressed, but we need to address the root causes. It's really what we're living today is symptoms. So we need to address the root causes of why we are in this situation. And so all of these things, yes, while addressing the root causes, they present today big risk at the borders. And these are the issues that we need to mitigate. These are the risks that we need to put a system in place so that we can address them correctively. And then, you know, that we can also allow, you know, a free movement of people. So I think that, yes, it exists, but it's not, you know, I think that the proportion of it is really less compared to the benefit that we're going to get. And actually, this is a problem that's faced by Africa. But I also want to say that this is not a problem of Africa. I mean, the whole world is also living the same situation and all over. So I think that it's a wider problem, and hopefully that the international community will address it correctively, put the system in place, but again, address the root causes of the problem so our future will be the future that we really want.
We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, I will be joined by my expert guests who will help us understand the idea of an open borders policy and how Africa stands to benefit. Keep watching. Now, the idea of a borderless Africa and its potential to transform the continent's economies has received strong backing from Africa's top entrepreneurs and government policy chiefs.
The case of Rwanda is that really, for us, anybody coming here, anybody has the right. And anybody can come at any time and get a visa at the airport. It is helping the numbers to improve in terms of the tourism, in terms of the other people who are coming here for different businesses. But we know that the African Development Bank and other countries are also working very hard to see how they can remove all these kind of barriers so that eventually Africa actually, in terms of doing business in Africa, becomes much easier, starting with Africans. And then together, of course, with others.
The way it's very difficult for us to produce goods and export them to Europe and be competitive. And it is a pity that within us, you know, we have issues. One of the real issues is actually movement of goods and people. I mean, today, let's take, for instance, a country like Rwanda, where they say, okay, fine, you know, it is free visa for any African who is visiting Rwanda can get a visa at the airport. But despite that, Rwandans need visas for 78% of African countries, which does not really make sense at all. I mean, today, how do you really interact? How do you do businesses among yourselves? But our situation is not really a bad situation, because if you look at it, we have inwards businesses that we could actually do that can transform our various countries.
Welcome back to Talk Africa. Now, to help put in perspective Africa's pursuit of an open borders policy and the benefits for individual countries and the continent at large, I have expert guests standing by. In Johannesburg, Adetunji Omotola, he's a trade and investment analyst. In Abuja, Nekebari Anna, he's a legal practitioner and advocate of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. And with me in Nairobi is consultant economist David Owiro. To you all, David. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in this discussion. Nekebari Anna, in Abuja, to you first, though, and let's start off with Ghana's recent decision to ensure that it will be offering visa-free policy to all African nationals across the continent. First, from Ghana's perspective, Why do you think they made this decision? And what?
Thank you very much for the question. It's important to note that we should look at Ghana's decision within the context of Pan-Africanism and a desire to create a seamless migration policy that will boost the local economy and reduce poverty. Legally speaking, we want to note that the national migration policy of Ghana is in consonance with the 1992 Ghanaian constitution, which says that all Ghanaians have the right to move freely within Ghana, and other non-Ghanaians, non-citizens of Ghana also have the right to live in Ghana and to take up residency in Ghana and move freely in Ghana. We want to note that the Republic of Ghana is a state party to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the ECOWAS Treaty. Article 12 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights does emphasize the need for all Africans to move freely within any member state of the EU. And the same is also in consonance with Article 27 rather, of the ECOWAS Treaty, of which Ghana is a state party. So all the Ghanaian government has done is to give legal teeth to those policies that have been there before the African Union when the African Union was formed, and also the ECOWAS Treaty.
Adetunji, to you though, in Southern Africa, know that this is also going to assist with that whole question of seamless migration, particularly with the Ghanaian situation. What's been the issue though in the Southern African states? Because we know a lot of Zimbabweans and a lot of Malawians move quite freely up in the African region.
In my view, I think firstly, we must congratulate Ghana for taking this bold step. I think it falls in line with the African Union. If you remember 2-3 years ago, the African Union was 50 years of the formation of the OAU. And if you remember that Kwame Nkrumah, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, was one of the founding fathers of OAU. If you also remember that in 1957, when Ghana got their independence, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said that Ghana's independence is meaningless unless it is coupled with the liberation of the rest of Africa. And we all know that in Southern Africa, you have some of the youngest countries like Namibia and South Africa. And of course, even though they're part of SADC, many people who want to travel into West Africa have to go through the rigor of getting, a visa. And those visas are not cheap. But look, I think this opportunity that has been taken by Ghana is a bold step. I think that the issue of traveling to inside Africa with visas limits opportunity for business. It creates delays and unnecessary wastage and cost and misery. So we believe that Ghana's position is very attractive. Ghana has been growing very well in the last 5 to 10 years because of the oil find. So there are people who are already moving into Ghana. I see a lot of South Africans, surely, who adopted even Ghana during the 2010 World Cup. And they came up with the term Bagana, Bagana, Bagana. So South Africans will be very excited at this opportunity. Because some people who want to go into Nigeria sometimes also feel that they should go into Ghana first, set up shop, and then take their wares into Nigeria. So I think it's going to also help trade in that region. Also for Ivory Coast, the fact that Ghana borders Ivory Coast will also mean more opportunity for Cote d'Ivoire as well.
David, I want to jump in here with you, David, because a lot of issues have been raised by the two gentlemen, particularly the whole question of what it will do for trade and investment, in this case for Ghana. But what about the rest of the continent?
Certainly. I mean, one of the greatest hindrances between intra-African trade has always been the mobility of its people. If Africans cannot access 55% of African countries, that's a major hindrance, especially when it comes to travel and tourism. And so this move by Ghana perhaps will lead the way and show the examples to other countries that indeed you don't need to have a long, laborious process. Offering, in fact, visa on arrival sometimes doesn't compromise the security or the background checks that are often conducted. And we have examples of where these have worked in East Africa and in fact even West Africa. Right. We've seen tourism numbers increasing in terms of their GDP contributions as a result of the visa policies of individual countries.
Right. Adetunji, in Johannesburg, though, there have been challenges because Africans are across the continent, only about 25% of African countries offer visas on arrivals for African nationals. Where is the challenge here? Why is this the case?
I think there's a number of things why Africa is difficult to navigate. Only recently did most of the African airlines have gone under. Of course, we have bureaucracy, high tariffs. Most of the countries in Africa still have significantly high tariffs for imports that are even coming from within Africa. So if you want to bring things from Nigeria into South Africa, you're going to pay duty. All those issues are a serious hindrance to integration. Currencies. We have 33 currencies in 54 countries.
Right.
Some countries in Africa, they don't even know each other's currencies, but they know the US dollar, they know the British pound. So there are many bottlenecks that affects, it's not just a visa issue, it's the currency of how we trade, how people still prefer to trade with their former colonial masters and to trade with their neighbors. Nigeria, for example, all our neighbors are French-speaking countries.
Nekabari, I'll jump in here, though, and put that issue to you, because Adetunji is talking about all the constraints, though, to regional integration. Nigeria, as he mentioned, there borders a lot of Francophone African countries. How big a challenge is this, though?
Yeah, it's really challenging, because in addition to what Adetunji have said, if you look at currency fluctuation, most of the countries bordering Nigeria are Francophone countries who use the CFA, while Nigeria uses the Naira. Use of currency fluctuation is a problem. Language barriers is a problem. Cultural differences is a problem. But with the initiative that has been introduced by Ghana, I hope that other African countries will toe the same path and create the United States of Africa, as Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and the other founding fathers of the African Union envisaged.
Is that a possibility?
Yes, indeed, it's a possibility, because as already has been mentioned, one of the goals of the African Union has been to have a continental-wide movement-free space within which member states or nationals of member states can move freely within Africa. And so, in fact, we have initiatives to put in place a diplomatic, or rather an African passport, which is basically to ensure that any holder of an African passport can have access to another African country. But, coming back to the economics of it, if you look at the arguments against having visa on arrival, most states cite that, background checks are necessary, and indeed they are necessary. But if you look at the additional burden that they put in place, sometimes it doesn't make economic sense. And the example that I'll give is initiatives in Asia, where as long as you have a visa for, say, a Schengen visa or a US visa, basically it means that you've gone through the background processes, and these nations in the Schengen area or in the US have deemed that you pose no threat, and they gave you a valid visa. As long as you have that valid visa, you then have access to those countries. It sort of takes away the bureaucracy that follows with having to do checks and having to do background checks and so forth, and therefore making it cheaper on those countries. And so for me, the challenge is to other African nations, not only the visa on arrival policy stance, but also to look at ways in which people who already have visas to countries which do enough or standardized background checks.
Adetunji, for the Southern African region, though, what's been the biggest fear in having a visa-free policy?
I think the people who are worried about immigration are the same people who are going to stifle growth and development. We have a continent with about 1 billion people or more than $1 trillion in GDP, far more than any single country in Europe, I suspect. I think the critical thing for me, though, is that before we start saying people should move around as freely as they want to, we need to secure our continent. We have problems in Mali, Central African Republic, even Burundi, Boko Haram in the northeast of Nigeria, Al-Shabaab running around in Somalia. There are too many trouble spots. And so if you were to say people can move around freely, currently we still have borders that are very porous. So if we now open everything up, what's the impact of it? I don't know. But I think the challenge really is for us to focus on things like energy inadequacy. We only have about 90,000 megawatts of electricity. I think if we can create energy, create jobs, create prosperity, industrialize, build bridges and roads, hospitals, I think people would feel even less compelled to be worried about African integration, because this will happen naturally.
Right. David Owiro, you have the final word on this.
Well, I think the priority should start with providing preferential treatment within the regional economic blocs. As we know it, having an open visa plan opens your country to the entire population. This could be both leisure visitors or even business people. But if you want to move it to the next level, you have to look at trade in services and begin to offer preferential modes. If you begin to have preferential treatment, you therefore have a third category, members of your own regional economic community. And there you offer perhaps more favorable terms for employment. And that goes a long way in terms of encouraging people from the region to invest within our own communities and countries within Africa. The third step, of course, is this migration policy, where we have to begin to manage how labor migrates and which kind of labor do we want to migrate. As we've heard, we have a lot of problems with forced migrations within Africa. We have a lot of conflicts going on, and so people are looking for economic sustainability, economic viability. And so if we have a migration policy that manages which skill or which subset of laborers migrate, then we can be able to pace our economic development and achieve that industrialization that we want.
All right, and that's all we have time for this week. But thank you to my guests for their insight. In Johannesburg, Adetunji Omotola, he's a trade and investment analyst. In Abuja, Nekabari Anna, he's a legal practitioner and advocate of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. And with me in Nairobi is consultant economist David Owiro. Thank you for joining us on the program, and thank you all for joining us on the program. Remember, you can continue this discussion by joining the conversation online through Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And join us again next week for another edition of Talk Africa. And goodbye.